The scent of jet fuel and overpriced coffee hung in the air, a familiar perfume that usually signaled the start of an adventure. But today, it was the scent of culmination, of a secret lovingly nurtured for 3 long, agonizing months. I stood at the airport curbside pickup, the keys to our long-term parking spot dangling from my fingers, a playful jingle against the frantic drumming of my heart. Every beat hammered with a joyful, nervous excitement that made my breath catch in my throat. This was it. The perfect surprise. My name is Celeste Morgan, and at 39, I felt I had orchestrated the masterpiece of my marital life. For a decade, I had been married to Thomas, 13 years together in total. He was the ambitious, charming man who had swept me off my feet at a wine tasting in downtown Portland when I was just 25. He had a way of looking at me back then, a laser-focused intensity that made me feel like the only woman in a crowded room, the most fascinating, brilliant creature he had ever encountered. He worked for a mid-sized investment firm, climbing the corporate ladder with a ruthless determination I had once found intoxicatingly attractive. Our courtship was a whirlwind of romantic dinners, spontaneous weekend getaways, and grand gestures that made me feel cherished, seen, adored. He proposed on Christmas morning with a 2-carat diamond ring that glittered almost as brightly as the promises of a beautiful future he whispered against my ear. For the first few years of our marriage, I genuinely thought we were building something special, a true partnership founded on love, mutual respect, and shared dreams. I worked as a marketing director for Crimson Harbor Group, a boutique hospitality consulting firm, a job I loved and excelled at. We were a power couple, or so I told myself. We bought a beautiful house in the West Hills with a bay window where I imagined we might someday watch our children play in the yard. I lovingly cultivated a garden, filling it with roses and lavender. I painted the front door a sophisticated sage green because Thomas had offhandedly mentioned he liked the color. But somewhere along the way, the vibrant colors of our life together had begun to fade into a dull, predictable gray. Thomas's ambition curdled into arrogance, his confidence into a chilling condescension. The grand gestures ceased, replaced by subtle put-downs disguised as jokes at dinner parties. He started working longer and longer hours, spending more time with colleagues than with me, treating our beautiful house like a hotel where he occasionally slept and changed clothes. I had attributed the growing distance to stress, to the immense pressures of his high-powered job, to the natural, inevitable evolution of a long-term relationship. I told myself that all marriages went through rough patches. I just had to try harder, be more understanding, more supportive, more perfect. If I just planned better, loved more perfectly, things would go back to how they used to be. This trip to Italy was my grand gesture, my $15,000 attempt to repaint our marriage in the brilliant hues of Tuscany. Using my own savings, money I'd been setting aside for my bonuses for years, I had planned what I thought would be the perfect surprise for our 10th wedding anniversary. A week-long romantic getaway. Every detail had been meticulously, lovingly arranged. First-class flights to Florence. A luxury villa overlooking the historic Arno River, its private balcony promising quiet mornings with espressos and evenings with Chianti. Private vineyard tours through the rolling Tuscan hills, reservations at Michelin-starred restaurants I had researched for weeks, a town car to whisk us from the airport to our personal paradise. I had been so proud of myself, so dizzy with anticipation. I imagined the look on Thomas's face when I revealed the surprise. I saw him sweeping me into his arms, his eyes wide with a mixture of shock and adoration. He would tell me how thoughtful I was, how much he loved me, how he had never appreciated me enough. The old Thomas would reappear, and the chasm between us would close. A sleek black town car, the very one I had booked, pulled up to the curb, interrupting my daydream. The back door opened and Thomas stepped out. He looked impeccable as always, in a tailored navy suit that highlighted his athletic build. But he wasn't alone. Emerging behind him was Veronica, his secretary. A 26-year-old blonde who wore skirts that barely covered her thighs and laughed at everything Thomas said like he was the most brilliant man alive. I'd met her once, at the company holiday party 6 months ago. I had watched as she hung on his every word, her perfectly manicured hand resting on his arm for just a fraction too long. "She's very young," I'd mentioned to Thomas on the drive home that night. "Youth brings fresh perspective," he had replied, a dismissive edge to his voice. "Something people our age sometimes forget." Our age. As if 39 was ancient. As if I had somehow failed by not remaining frozen at 26 forever. Now, she stood beside him at the curb, a vision in a tight white dress that clung to her like a second skin, her arm linked possessively through his. She was wearing the kind of outfit I used to wear before marriage, before I started prioritizing comfort over style, before I let myself become what Thomas apparently considered predictable. The keys in my hand suddenly felt cold and heavy. The excited hammering in my chest slowed to a painful, sinking thud. My carefully constructed fantasy shattered into a million sharp, glittering pieces. "Celeste," Thomas said, his tone devoid of warmth. There was no surprise in his eyes, only a flat, cold annoyance. He'd clearly been expecting me, but not in the way I'd hoped. "Thomas? What's going on?" My voice was a weak, trembling thing. Why is she here?" Veronica giggled, a high, tinkling sound that grated on my raw nerves. She looked from me to Thomas, a smug little smile playing on her perfectly glossed lips. "Actually," Thomas announced, his voice dripping with a condescension that felt like a physical blow, "I'm taking Veronica instead." The world tilted on its axis. The noise of the airport faded to a dull roar in my ears. I could only stare at him, at this man I had loved for 13 years, the man I had married, the man I had just spent a small fortune on to surprise. "What?" The word was a choked whisper. "She's more exciting than you'll ever be, Celeste," he continued, the cruelty in his voice a scalpel slicing through the last vestiges of my hope. "You just drag me to museums and talk about architecture. This trip deserves some real fun." He gestured towards the waiting town car with a flick of his wrist. He was taking another woman on our anniversary trip. Using my money, my arrangements, my thoughtful gestures to romance someone else. The sheer audacity of it, the profound disrespect, was staggering. I stood there for a moment, paralyzed, processing the brutal reality of what was happening. The man I had loved for 13 years, married for 10, was essentially telling me I wasn't worth the surprise I'd spent months planning for him. He was discarding me like an old, boring book in favor of a newer, shinier model. Then, something inside me shifted. The heartbreak, the shock, the humiliation. They were all there, but they were being consumed by a new, colder, and far more dangerous emotion. A slow, icy fury began to build in my chest, a glacial calm that settled over the storm of my initial pain. I had been so proud of myself, so excited to see the look on his face. Now, I saw a stranger wearing the face of the man I had once believed would love me forever. His dismissive smile, the way he barely met my eyes, the casual cruelty in his voice, it was like seeing him clearly for the first time in years. I didn't say anything. I simply held out the keys to the town car and the thick, glossy envelope containing the printed itinerary. He took them from my hand without a flicker of remorse, his fingers brushing against mine with chilling indifference. "The car service will be here any minute," he said, checking his expensive watch with the casual indifference of someone discussing the weather. He was referring to the car meant to take me home. "You should probably head on. Maybe order takeout, and watch one of those period dramas you love so much." He turned, and with Veronica still clinging to his arm, they got into the town car. I watched them drive away, their laughter echoing through the tinted windows as they disappeared toward the airport terminal. The drive home from the airport felt surreal, like I was floating outside my own body, watching someone else's life fall apart. But beneath the hurt and humiliation, something else was stirring. Something that felt suspiciously like relief, mixed with a cold, calculating fury that surprised me with its intensity. I had met Thomas 14 years ago. The first few years were a fairy tale. But looking back now, I could see the warning signs I had chosen to ignore. The way he rolled his eyes when I talked about my work. The subtle put-downs disguised as jokes. The increasing frequency with which he mentioned Veronica, how smart she was, how efficient, how she really understood the business in ways that most people didn't. I had attributed it all to stress, to the natural ebb and flow of a long-term relationship. I told myself that all marriages went through rough patches, and if I just tried harder, we would get through it. What a fool I'd been. As I pulled into our driveway, I sat in the car for a moment, staring at the house we had bought together 5 years ago. The garden I had lovingly cultivated, the front door I had painted sage green because Thomas said it was sophisticated, the bay window where I had imagined our future. It all felt like evidence of a life I had been living alone. I walked into our house, the silence amplifying the emptiness in my chest. And then I did something the old Celeste, the accommodating, people-pleasing Celeste, would never have done. I walked into our shared office, picked up my phone, and immediately called my travel agent, Patricia, who had helped me arrange every detail of the Italian itinerary. My hands were remarkably steady as I dialed her number, my voice calm and professional when she answered. Patricia, it's Celeste Morgan. Celeste. Of course, dear. What can I help you with? Getting excited for the big trip? Her cheerful voice chirped through the phone. I need to make some changes to the Italy booking we discussed, I said, my tone even. Oh my. Is everything all right? Everything is perfect, I said, and for the first time in hours I meant it. A cold, sharp clarity had replaced the fog of my grief. I need to transfer everything from my husband's name to mine. The flights, the villa, the car service, the restaurant reservations, everything. There was a pause on the other end of the line. Oh my, she repeated, her voice now laced with concern. How quickly can you make these changes? I asked. Well, since everything was booked under your credit card anyway, it should be quite straightforward. I can have it all transferred within the hour. Should I cancel Mr. Morgan's ticket? Yes, please, I said. And add a guest under my name instead. Catherine Webb. Catherine was my college roommate, a successful architect who had been telling me for years that I needed to take more time for myself. She had just finished a major project and had mentioned she was desperately in need of a vacation. I knew she would drop everything for a spontaneous trip to Italy, especially when she heard the circumstances. After hanging up with Patricia, I called Catherine. She answered on the second ring. Celeste? This is a surprise. Aren't you supposed to be getting ready for your romantic Italian getaway? Change of plans, I said. How would you like to spend a week in Tuscany? First-class flights, luxury villa, wine tours, the works. Are you serious? What happened to Thomas? I gave her the abbreviated version of the afternoon's events. Catherine's response was immediate and colorful, involving several words that would have made Thomas clutch his pearls and lecture her about professionalism. That absolute bastard, she finished. Of course, I'll come. When do we leave? Flight's at 6 tonight. Can you make it? I'll be at the airport in 3 hours, she declared, with my passport and a strong desire to drink Italian wine while plotting creative revenge scenarios. After hanging up with Catherine, I sat in my living room and felt something I hadn't experienced in years. Pure, unadulterated excitement. Not the anxious anticipation I had been feeling about surprising Thomas, but genuine joy at the prospect of an adventure with my best friend. I spent the next 2 hours packing, choosing clothes I actually wanted to wear instead of outfits I thought would please my husband. I included the red dress Thomas had always hated, saying it was too bold for someone my age. I packed the hiking boots he claimed were unfeminine, the vintage Leica camera he said made me look pretentious, and the collection of art history books he dismissed as boring. By 4 o'clock, I was ready. By 5, I was at the airport, boarding pass in hand, watching Thomas's phone number flash repeatedly on my screen as I let every call go to voicemail. The first-class cabin felt like a cocoon of luxury as Catherine and I settled into our seats with champagne flutes in hand. The irony wasn't lost on me. I was finally taking the romantic Italian vacation I had dreamed about, just not with the person I had originally planned to share it with. "So, tell me everything," Catherine said, tucking her legs under her as the plane taxied toward the runway. "Start from the beginning. And don't leave out any details. I want to understand exactly how we got from surprise anniversary trip to girls' weekend in Tuscany, while your husband is presumably stranded at the airport." I told her the whole story, from the months of careful planning to Thomas's casual cruelty at the curbside pickup. Catherine listened with the kind of focused attention that reminded me why we had remained close friends despite living in different cities for the past 15 years. "You know, that's not how love works, right?" she said softly when I finished. "Real love doesn't require you to diminish yourself to make someone else comfortable." "I know that," intellectually, I trailed off, staring out the window as Portland's lights grew smaller below us. "But when you're living it, when you're watching your marriage slowly dissolve, and you can't figure out what you did wrong." "What you did wrong was marry a man who stopped seeing you as a person," Catherine said bluntly. "From what you've told me, Thomas has been treating you like a supporting character in his life story for years. The fact that he brought his secretary on your anniversary trip isn't the problem, it's just the symptom." My phone buzzed with another call from Thomas. I glanced at the screen and saw that I had missed 17 calls in the past 2 hours. The voicemails were piling up, each one probably more frantic than the last. "Aren't you curious what he's saying?" Catherine asked, nodding toward my phone. "Not particularly. I can imagine. He's probably realized by now that their names aren't on any of the reservations, that the car service won't show up, that the villa has no record of their booking. He's calling to yell at me, to demand I fix what I've supposedly broken." We landed in Florence at 7 a.m. local time, and I felt like I was stepping into a different version of my life. The morning light was golden and warm, the air smelled of coffee and ancient stones, and everything around me felt vibrant and alive in a way that made me realize how gray my world had become. Catherine and I breezed through customs and found our driver, Luigi, waiting with a sign bearing my name. Luigi was exactly what I had hoped for when I booked him: charming, knowledgeable, and delighted to be driving 2 American women who were clearly ready for an adventure. "Signora Morgan," he said, with a smile that crinkled the corners of his eyes. "Welcome to Firenze. I have been looking forward to this week. Your villa is magnificent. You will love it." The drive through Florence was breathtaking. We wound through narrow streets lined with Renaissance buildings, past the Duomo rising majestically against the morning sky, over the Ponte Vecchio with its glittering jewelry shops. Catherine pressed her face to the window like a child, pointing out architectural details and snapping photos with her phone. "I can't believe you planned all this," she said, her voice filled with awe, "and we were going to spend it listening to Thomas complain about walking too much and wanting to find American food." My phone had been buzzing continuously since we landed. The missed calls were now in the 30s, and the voicemail icon showed I had more messages than I could count. As we pulled up to the villa, curiosity finally got the better of me. "You know what?" I said to Catherine. "I think I'm ready to hear what Thomas has to say." I played the first voicemail on speaker as Luigi carried our bags to the villa's entrance. "Celeste, what the hell is going on? We got to the hotel, and they're saying they have no reservation under my name. There's obviously been some kind of mistake. Call me back immediately." The second message: "This is insane. The car service never showed up, and now the hotel is saying everything is booked under your name instead of mine? I don't know what kind of game you're playing, but you need to fix this. Right now." By the 5th message, Thomas's voice had taken on the sharp edge I knew meant he was truly rattled. "Celeste, I know you're getting these messages. We're stuck at the airport with nowhere to go and no way to reach the contacts on this itinerary because everything has your name on it. This is childish and vindictive, and you're ruining what was supposed to be a nice vacation." Catherine was practically in tears from laughing. "Oh, this is better than any revenge movie I've ever seen. He's completely helpless without your organizational skills." The 10th message was where things got interesting. Thomas's voice was different, smaller, less commanding. Look, maybe I was hasty earlier. Maybe we can work something out. Veronica and I are willing to share the accommodations with you. We could all figure this out together. Share the accommodations? Catherine repeated incredulously. He wants you to fund a vacation where you get to watch him romance his secretary? The messages continued to escalate from there. Angry demands gave way to frustrated bargaining, which evolved into something approaching panic. In the final message, left just 20 minutes before we listened, Thomas's voice was tight with barely controlled desperation. Celeste, I'm begging you. We're sitting in the airport with no hotel, no car, no plan. Veronica is crying, and I look like an idiot. Please, just call me back.
We can talk about this. We can fix this.
We're married, for Christ's sake. You can't just leave your husband stranded in Italy. Catherine snorted. Watch her. The phone rang again. This time, I answered. Hello, Thomas. Celeste. Finally. Listen, we need to meet. We need to talk about this situation and figure out how to move forward. I admit I handled things poorly at the airport, but... Thomas. I interrupted, my voice calmer than I felt. I gave Veronica the information for your return flights. She can go home tonight. You, however, are not welcome on those flights. What are you talking about? Those are my tickets. Actually, they're my tickets. I bought them, I planned them, and I transferred them to my name. I've graciously allowed Veronica to use one of them. The other one is mine. There was a long pause. So, what am I supposed to do? I suggest you call your secretary and ask her to book you a new flight home.
Oh, wait.
Your secretary is standing right next to you, and she'll be on a plane to Portland in 6 hours. Celeste, you can't be serious about this. I've never been more serious about anything in my life, I said. Have a safe trip home, Thomas. Eventually. I hung up and immediately blocked his number. Catherine raised her wine glass. Now that, she said, was beautiful. As I reflected on my journey from devoted wife to woman reclaiming her power, I realized that sometimes the most profound revenge isn't about destruction. It's about discovery, about finding the strength to value yourself exactly as much as you've been valuing everyone else.